What is up, everybody? Draft season is officially in the books. This episode's going to be talking a lot about that. Once again, for my reactions to the Jordan documentary, you're going to have to wait till Thursday because there's more important, pressing topics to me. This show is brought to you by Mom's Basement Productions, and don't forget to follow the show on Twitter at Chris Rennie Show. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Chris Rennie CFB. Thank you all for coming. Enjoy the show.
I can't do this anymore. What's this guy saying? Who gave these national radio hosts these jobs? Jeez. Can't even understand that guy. What's he even talking about? I can't take it anymore. Those national media personalities making you feel like that. Make a change. Listen to this idiot about the sports that matter from the opinion that matters. You said it, not me. Now for today's takes from the most opinionated host in sports talk.
It's another day at the office. This is your host, Christopher Rennie. We're talking NFL draft all day today. Got a little bit of sports news at the end, but that's about it. Besides that, we're just living our lives, talking the NFL draft, winners, losers, an especially big loser, business casual Roger Goodell, and a more general conversation on if this draft was successful. So to get this show started, the NFL draft has been concluded, and the virtual aspect made for much more intimacy when it came to player selections, and you got a good look into the lives of all the coaches, the players, the general managers, the owners, Jerry Jones especially on his mega yacht, Bruce Arians on his patio, Bill Belichick in his nicely furnished, comfortable Pawtucket at home. You just keep going down the list, and it really let you into some of the lives of your favorite athletes, your favorite coaches, and your favorite NFL personnel members, if you have those. There was controversy. Mike Vrabel's son, was he on a toilet or was he on a stool? We don't know. But that was a very, very deceptive image. Was Mike Vrabel playing mind games with everybody else in the draft? Another discussion we need to keep looking into. I'm going to let that go to the PFT commenter and Big Cat because that's more their alley. And I'm going to stick to rating these classes and talking directly about the sport of football. Now, the weird thing to me is how the NFL will probably go back to doing everything the classical way. You call a player, you get on stage, you've got some of the more well-known draftable players at home with the cameras. Some people don't go to that first round in the draft and sit in the green room because it can be embarrassing when you're sitting at home in a green room, or at home versus when you're sitting at home in a green room on national TV with the cameras in your face when everyone's talking about how you've slid from a top 10 pick to the edge of the first round, beginning of the second round, waiting till tomorrow to get drafted. It's just, the one thing I think this draft got right was making the draft personal, and I know it was all done out of necessity and not because of what they wanted to. This was supposed to be a huge party in Vegas this year, and we all understand that. But I think the virtual ability and the virtual capabilities that technology's provided us gives us another interesting way to watch the draft. And I think it gives you a way to follow not only your favorite players in the first round who get to go up on stage, but some of your favorite players on day 2 and day 3. they really got a look into that, with that process, what it's like waiting. And then, I was waiting with KJ Hill all the way until the 7th round. I was super disappointed. I watched the guy for 4 years make tons of plays. And the Chargers, they got a really good one. I believe that for sure. But now, the draft's going to Cleveland next year. Dog check. It's a fun event. I know in Nashville they canceled. They didn't cancel it in Nashville. What was I going to say? A lot of people were upset that they had the draft in Nashville on certain weekends. 2 ladies specifically. We won't get into that story here. No need to disappoint them more about their bachelorette party being ruined by the NFL draft. I'd say that's more poor planning on their part. But we'll see. Cleveland, I don't think anyone's really planning bachelorette or bachelor parties there, so I don't think there's going to be any issues when it comes to that. But yeah, I think you take that thing to Cleveland, you provide that personal touch you get with this virtual draft in the later round, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. You still let those players live their dream of walking across the stage if they want to, or you just get that access through the camera and the Zoom technology, because that was awesome. It really was. But yeah, I just want to also mention, don't get me wrong, growing up I had dreams of walking across that stage. We all loved the defensive lineman bear hugging and picking up Roger Goodell. But it would also be really fun to celebrate that experience at home with friends and family. I think we could all agree on that. But yeah, I'm excited for the next draft. One thing I mentioned on Friday when I did the first round draft special, sort of reviewing how the first round went, I talked about business casual Roger Goodell. And when you look at Roger Goodell, loosen it up. It was awesome. Roger Goodell made TikToks. He was doing all that fun stuff. It was definitely a different Roger Goodell than we're used to seeing. And that's I think it was really good for the guy. If I'm being honest, I think you look deeper into that, and I think Goodell was honestly a little likable. It's hard to say that. A lot of people will never say that, but I really had fun watching Roger Goodell sort of just get tired. He was calling picks all the way into the 4th round, just sitting there. You could tell he was throwing back some scotches. He made that shirt change on night 1. His house was nice. He sat in his chair. He played with his dog. He did interviews. He tried hugging a defensive lineman through the TV screen. So you knew the buzz. You knew the boy was buzzing. The commissioner of the NFL was chugging scotches, putting them down, and reading cards upside down. That's the Goodell we want. That's my commissioner. Business casual Roger Goodell. None of this, well, it's for the Shield, all this stuff. No, the Shield's fun, all right? And we saw what it could be when it's fun. And that's what we saw in Roger Goodell this weekend. And that's something that was very exciting. And smooth transitioning forward, there was definitely something less exciting. And when you look at this draft, it is routinely rated the worst draft by all the beat writers, all the NFL draft writers. This draft was terrible, as the words of Charles Barkley would be. Terrible, like his golf swing. That's how bad this Packers draft was. So the most perplexing part of this draft was the thought process of what the Packers were doing from a decision-making standpoint. And I tried my best not to judge. I even seeked out Packer fans to sort of understand what their thought process was behind it. That first pick didn't make much sense. I'll be honest. But then, I let it make sense to me. I did. And then they made the second pick. All right, so their first pick was pretty polarizing. They picked Jordan Love. And now on paper, this draft was not the strongest QB draft. Hindsight. The two best quarterbacks, Justin Herbert, let me start over. The three best quarterbacks were Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, and Tua Tagovailoa. Those guys were drafted early in the top 6 picks. After that, there was a steep drop-off, and I don't know who Jacob Eason is. I don't know who Jordan Love is as a player in the NFL, but in college, they were very inconsistent, strong-armed passers. Jake Fromm was the opposite. He was a very consistent, limited passer. So which side are you taking? The Packers went the route of strong-armed, high-ceiling, extremely low-floor passer in Jordan Love. All right, and now it was interesting because Aaron Rodgers is now a year older than Brett Favre was when the Packers made the conscious decision to get his heir to the throne. Now, it's a very similar situation. When you look at Brett Favre coming out of college, when he got drafted by the Atlanta Falcons, the dude had a cannon arm, but he really couldn't play within the system. When you looked at Aaron Rodgers at Cal, he was a very strong-armed quarterback. He could really let that thing fly. But, again, wasn't known for his pinpoint accuracy. It's sort of why he fell a little bit. He was also a little bit on the slender side, but he's proven over the years that he has what it takes to be the best quarterback in the NFL. For a while before Patrick Mahomes came along, he was the most talented quarterback to ever play the game, and now it's a debate. Is it Dan Marino? Is it Aaron Rodgers? Is it Brett Favre? Is it Patrick Mahomes? That's a debate we're going to let everyone else have. The point still stands, and they drafted Aaron Rodgers. All right, they've had 2 Super Bowls in the 25 years those guys have been starting for the franchise. So that's a little short, short of what it should be when you have 2 of the most talented passers of all time. So what do? They draft another quarterback in the first round. And this stat's the most glaring stat. Since Aaron Rodgers has taken over as a starter. All right, you heard me. He took over as a starter in I want to say 2008. Let's find out. Let's take a look in the internet. Yeah, so I was right. It was 2008. That is 12 years ago. In 12 years, Aaron Rodgers, the best quarterback in the league, has not had a skill position player drafted in the first round to help him. Now, don't get me wrong. They found Devontae Adams late. They found some really good skill position players late. They found Aaron Jones, not in the first round, obviously. And that's where it gets perplexing. There were 2 solid linebackers on the board when the Packers were drafting, and the deepest receiver class in a few years. This decision was head-scratching. The Colts got Michael Pittman Jr. in the second round. T. Higgins went in the second round. There were receivers at 27 that were legitimate NFL number 1s. Chase Claypool later. That's a very underrated pick. He could play tight end. He could play receiver. But you decided to take the quarterback. All right, we'll convince ourselves that that's okay. All right, that's where we're going to stand. We're going to convince ourselves that it's fine. You're taking the heir apparent. If you believe in this guy, we get it. It's a quarterback. If you believe in him, he's your guy. He's your system guy. We got to roll the dice. And whatever happens, happens. All right, I get it. The draft continued. Many teams were filling out their roster, drafting for need. And then the Packers went again in the second round. When you look at what the Packers did in the second round, you're going to be like, wow, that's really head-scratching. They picked A.J. Dillon, running back, Boston College. So it was Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams were by far the 2 most productive players for the Packers last year. But wasn't a very exciting player for the Packers their starting running back, Aaron Jones. And I know Aaron Jones is good. He's solid. If I remember correctly, he battled through some injuries throughout the season. But A.J. Dillon, that was a reach, 100%. When you look at the board when A.J. Dillon was drafted, it was I'm pretty sure J.K. Dobbins was still there. Don't quote me on that. I'm pulling it up right now. But this was their second round pick. This was round 2. The Green Bay Packers select A.J. Dillon. And I don't want to knock a player. I don't want to knock these guys. They're living out their dreams. This is the best. This is the best time of their lives. This is cool. This is what it's all about. We fly through it. We look. We go deeper. And that was who they decided to pick. You can't fault them for it. You can, actually. You could really fault them for it. This is why the Packers have not won more Super Bowls with Aaron Rodgers as starting quarterback. Plain and simple. Now, I really like their third pick as a player. All right, don't get me wrong. I really like Josiah DeGuara. He's a good football player. He played at Cincinnati. When I was doing my scouting reports for my other show, Buck Off, he was like the name that kept popping up. And when they took on the Ohio State Buckeyes, Josiah DeGuara was one of the two guys making plays the whole game. The two guys I said on the Buck Off were the two guys making plays the whole game. Michael Warren was also playing pretty well in the first half. DeGuara is a little undersized for tight end. They drafted him as an H-back, but he will line up with his hand down in the dirt and as a wing and as a blocking back, and he will fill those roles out pretty solidly. But once again, nope, no receiver. Not yet. So I give them Packers on that day. After day 2, I was like, they're not going to do it. And you know who was still there? KJ Hill, Donovan Peoples-Jones, tons of talented wide receivers. I'm going to talk about the best and worst drafts. And people got like Michael DuVernay, one of the best receivers in the Big 12, the 3rd round. DPJ was in the 6th round. Like I said, it's just it was so odd, the draft they had. And you look deeper into it, you keep looking at it, and it doesn't make any sense. There were 37 receivers drafted, and there were many more signed as undrafted free agents. I had the 4th round pulled up, and then it totally quit out on me. And later, the receivers taken, and it was such a mistake on their part not to get at least one of these awesome receivers taken in this draft. 37 wide receivers. You know how many? That's so many wide receivers. And not a single one of them ended up playing for the Green Bay Packers. All right, there were 6 in the first round, 7 in the second round, 4 in the third round, 2 in the fourth round, 8 in the fifth round, 6 more wide receivers in round 6, and 4 more in round 7. That is a lot of depth in that draft. There's not going to be another receiver class that deep in years, and they wasted it. They absolutely wasted it. Now, what's Aaron Rodgers going to do? He's going to throw to the same people as last year who came up just short. All right, Devontae Adams, true number 1. The rest of it, they lost Geronimo Allison, their other good receiver. They've got St. Brown, Quanarius, one of the St. Browns. That wasn't a joke. I just don't know which one it is. I know his brother got drafted, and I don't want to confuse him. I probably shouldn't have said his name. But they have him, so there's 3 right there. Now they've got Josiah DeGuara and Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. So we'll see how that works. I think it was a very safe draft. I think they could have added some very talented receivers. I remember the guy from Florida was on the board a long time. Tyler Johnson from Minnesota was on the board for quite some time. And as I mentioned, there was KJ Hill. There was players almost every round they had a pick available that were going to be good NFL receivers. And that's where I think it gets a little suspect on it. And I think they had the worst draft in the NFL this year, in the NFL Draft 2020. I think the Packers had the worst draft. They took a quarterback, reach. Took a running back, reach. They took a tight end, who isn't even a true tight end in the NFL, reach. And then they wasted a 37 receiver draft without taking a single one of them. That's amazing. That's inept. That's not good. All right, so we talked about the worst draft in the NFL, and I still have a couple more on a list that I'm going to be reading out to you. This is going to be a nice section just reviewing the best and worst drafts, and I'm going to give you some of the drafts I liked a little bit, and I'm not going to really talk down on too many drafts. I think a lot of teams did pretty well this year. Obviously, you have to judge drafts in hindsight every time, 5 years down the road. Safest bet. The Browns haven't won a Super Bowl, so you know they haven't drafted well. The Chiefs won a Super Bowl, so you know they've been drafting well. That was just a tough time. So the next segment we're going to get into after I take a quick second to review is best and worst drafts. Alrighty, so when it comes to... I'm back, yeah, by the way. So there are teams who had a lot of draft picks. And, you know, a lot of picks really helps you win a draft. You know, you want to accumulate a wealth of picks over a season, over a couple years, and eventually it's all got to come together. Your scouting department, your general manager accumulating picks, you trading veterans, you getting this youth inside your building, integrated into your system, ready to go and make a difference at the NFL level. So there are teams, you know, who have really big drafts, really small drafts. Some teams make the most of it. Some teams only had 4 or 5 picks, and they made the most of it. They got like a B grade, like consensusly. So that's awesome. But to me, you need to have that balance. You have to have this ability to pick for need with great value and not reach on anybody. And it's a balancing act because sometimes, you know, it's your guy, and you need to take that leap. And I think these teams did the best at balancing the risk, the reward, accumulating assets, and putting their team in a position to get better not only in the future, but next year. Because that's what it's all about. So the first team I have on my list of best drafts is the Baltimore Ravens. This one absolutely pains me. I'm a Browns fan. They used to be the Browns. They left. They went to Baltimore. But when you review the Baltimore Ravens draft, all right, it is just one of the better drafts I've seen in like years. And it's not like they were starting at a high point. They had, I want to say, the 28th pick in the first round. They went 13-3 last year, so they weren't drafting from a high spot at all. So their draft picks in order: Patrick Queen, J.K. Dobbins, Justin Madubuike, Devin Duvernay, Malik Harrison, Tyree Phillips, Ben Bredesen, Broderick Washington Jr., James Prochet, and Geno Stone. All right, now once you get to that 6th or 7th round, if any of those players hit, the draft was a success. But when you look at the top end of this class, now I'm going to take an interesting look at this. The Patrick Queen selection to me was money. All right, people had him projected to go in that 15 to 20 range. He falls out, you know, maybe he goes 22, 23, 24. But no, he falls down to the Ravens. And Patrick Queen is a little undersized to be a professional linebacker, but he is in that same vein as Devin White and Devin Bush, and he's just an athlete. He's a freak athlete. Sideline to sideline, plays with so much ferocity, and it's just an unbelievable thing to watch. And, you know, as much as I despised LSU last year, I still found myself rooting for players like Patrick Queen, K'Lavon Chaisson, and Joe Burrow. They were extremely talented. Patrick Queen was gritty. He was undersized. But he really fits what the Ravens want to do. And the Ravens over the last couple of years have really struggled at that interior linebacker, the middle linebacker positions, the Will and the Mike. And now they got a true Mike in Patrick Queen who's physical enough, even though a little bit undersized, sort of in that Kiko Alonso size range where they're just really good athletes who make up for it with just this crazy mindset and physicality. He brings the heat. And it's been a while since they've had a player like Patrick Queen, the potential of Patrick Queen, and that's awesome. And the biggest value pick I think they took was Malik Harrison from Ohio State. Now, Malik Harrison, and I know a lot about him because I do a whole show on Ohio State. He came to Ohio State as a quarterback, and they almost moved him to running back, and they weren't sure where they were going to put him. They thought about maybe safety. But then he started putting on weight, and he ended up getting up to like 235 pounds, 240 pounds, was the perfect fit for that will linebacker position. He was thick, he was strong, he was a good athlete, he could cover well in that will position, like against slot receivers, against running backs, and he really made people know he was there when they had the ball. He was an enforcer for the Ohio State defense. He was by far the most physical linebacker. He led the team in tackles twice, and I wanted the Browns to fill out their linebacker room so much with him that I was legitimately upset the Ravens got him. And now I know it's not about your college players going to your favorite NFL team. It's nice when it happens, but I'm excited about who the Browns got. But then the Ravens, earlier in the draft, took J.K. Dobbins. And now, wasn't mad about that one. The Browns did not need a running back. They have Nick Chubb, they have Kareem Hunt. They might have the best running back tandem in the league from a top-end talent standpoint. The Ravens, though, Gus Edwards, Mark Ingram, J.K. Dobbins now. That's a three-headed monster for sure. And Dobbins might be the best of the bunch. He didn't win the Heisman. He should have been a finalist. He's fast. He's ferocious. He's going to play extremely well with that read option sort of concept. When he was a freshman, he played with J.T. Barrett, and he was very successful in that system. Lamar Jackson's obviously a better downfield thrower than J.T. Barrett. That's why he's an NFL starter. But Dobbins is going to add a lot to that running back room. And now a lot of people are like, well, why'd they take him there? They didn't really need a running back that bad. They've got all these guys. Well, the GM himself said he's just too much of a talent to pass up. All right. And the funniest thing about the Ravens draft is J.K. Dobbins and Malik Harrison were beating his brother's ass for 4 years for Malik Harrison. And that is what John does. And that's why John beat his brother in the Super Bowl. Now, my next team on the list is the Denver Broncos. We're going out to the AFC West. All right. The Broncos were very short on weapons last year. So in my head, I was confusing Cody Lattimore with Courtland Sutton, but after a quick Google search, you realize that Cody Lattimore was with the New York Giants, and Courtland Sutton was the man for the Broncos last year. He's a very talented receiver. He's a very big receiver, and when you look at what Courtland Sutton was able to accomplish last year, he was successful, and I think he's going to help Drew Lock grow. He's a very safe pick. Now you've got Noah Fant as well at tight end. You've got a very, very good group, honestly, and that's what you really hope for. And you add to that this draft. All right, a pretty solid group last year, but now you've got Jerry Jeudy, who was arguably the best receiver in the draft. I think it was CeeDee Lamb, but Jerry Jeudy just as much as his foot in the argument door on that one. KJ Hamler, extremely versatile. Really good punt returner, really good kick returner, really good athlete. You're going to be able to get him into that jet sweep action. You're going to be able to get him into that screen action. You'll be able to even shift him back into the backfield. He's that type of athlete, and he could beat people deep. He's a solid route runner. What really troubled KJ Hamler in his career, though, was drops. He had 9 his final season. Now, Albert Akwu-Bugnam, I hope I said that right. I am really struggling once you don't hear these names. He was from Missouri, and where they got him, I think he fits really well with Noah Fant. I think they're going to have a very good 2 tight end system, and that's what it's all about. The other draft pick I really liked from the Broncos was McTelvin Agim, and now you've got Bradley Chubb, Von Miller, and some help on the interior with McTelvin from Arkansas. He's a very, very burly man. He can play the 1 technique. He can be a true nose tackle. He can be a 3 technique. He can do it all. He's that type of football player. But, I mean, the offensive talent they accumulated is why I think the Broncos won this draft. You're going to get to see what Drew Lock's made out of. If he's not as good as you hope or not as good as advertised, John Elway's going to take another shot at another quarterback. Possibly in free agency. Now, the best draft. Next one. The Cleveland Browns. My Cleveland Browns did really good this year. They got arguably the best tackle in the draft in Jedrick Wills from Alabama. You look at their draft, I think they accumulated talent very well in the second round. I'm not a big Grant Delpit guy, but he's got a lot of talent, and where they got him in the draft, it was a good pick with how far he fell. They got 2 late steals. Nick Harris is an NFL starting center. He absolutely mauled my high school football team. And Donovan Peoples-Jones is a former 5-star recruit who had testing numbers like Ruggs and Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler. He is an elite level athlete who was underutilized in Jim Harbaugh's archaic offensive system. I'd say the one knock on Donovan Peoples-Jones is his lack of focus quite a bit when you look at who he was. He had a lot of drops, a lot of easy catches missed, but his athleticism and his he's got that ability to just be a different player. I really like the Harrison Bryant pick. He was a very solid tight end. That adds to the room with David Njoku and Austin Hooper. Kevin Stefanski really loves his tight ends, so might as well have another good one. And then Jacob Phillips from LSU is a very talented linebacker. And Jordan Elliott, the defensive tackle that the Browns took, is a really solid interior defender that's going to add a lot of depth in the middle. All good things, and that's why I think the Browns did it. Well, they were a team with the normal amount of picks. They took the normal amount of players, but every player fit a position in need. They took players that were on their board high when they got the opportunity to. They didn't reach, and that's what it's all about. So my final best draft is the Dallas Cowboys. I loved the CeeDee Lamb pick. I think CeeDee Lamb was the best receiver in the draft. You got Henry Ruggs III taken before him. He's a guy who can play inside-outside. He's strong. He's fast. He's got incredible hands. Great ball skill. He's been a number 1 receiver his whole career. And that's what it's all about. What the Cowboys have needed for so long is a true lockdown corner, and I really do believe they got that in Trayvon Diggs from Alabama. He's going to fit the system. They like to run there very well. They're pretty solid at safety. They don't have a true strong safety or a true free safety. A big problem was tackling. Trayvon Diggs does not shy away from contact. That's awesome. I think Neville Gilmore improves the D-line depth and brings a lot of upside, and I think the Biadasz pick from Wisconsin, the center guard, in the late rounds was one of the best value picks in the draft. And I really do full-heartedly believe the Cowboys had one of the best drafts. The Minnesota Vikings is another draft I liked. Not a best draft because they had 23 picks, it felt like. Every time I looked at the screen when I was watching in passing on day 2 and day 3, it felt like the Minnesota Vikings were drafting. So they drafted an elite number 1 receiver in Justin Jefferson, a good corner in Jeff Gladney. They got a steal in Ezra Cleveland where they got him. They really solidified their secondary, taking Cameron Dantzler, Harrison Hand, Josh Metellus from Michigan. I call him a designated chaser. And Brian Cole. They also added a backup quarterback in Nate Stanley, a very productive college defensive end in Kenny Willix, and honestly, I think if I wasn't so biased for their insane volume of picks, they probably would have had the best draft. So that's what I like to hear. The Bengals took advantage of their high pick and got the best player in each round. Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Logan Wilson, Akeem Davis-Gaither, Khalid Kareem, Hakeem Adeniji, Marcus Bailey. They really did a great job. T. Higgins is that first pick in the second round. Is going to pair extremely well with A.J. Green and Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd's probably going to solidify himself as a slot, and they're going to have T. Higgins and A.J. Green manning the outside positions. I think Wilson and Davis-Gaither provide quite a bit of linebacker flexibility and range, which was one of their biggest weakness. And they got some good, they got a good edge rusher in Khalid Kareem And I think when you look at who they got it was a solid draft. I think the Bungles didn't bungle this one up, so that means they probably did. The last draft I really like, Duval County, the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I'm a little biased here. I thought CJ Henderson was a reach, but I think when you look deeper into it, it's one of those. It's pick and choose. If he ends up being a good corner, it wasn't a reach. But I think C.J. Henderson was a great pick. K'Lavon Chaison's great. I think Laviska Shenault's one of the best receivers in the draft. Devon Hamilton, the most improved draft stock from last year to this year, undrafted to the third round. Ben Barch, Josiah Scott's a really good corner from Michigan State, very technically sound. So you had two really solid corners in those two. Colin Johnson's a very good receiver. And then Jake Luton from Oregon State was an awesome quarterback there and did as much as he could. So I think they found good value. I think with the volume they had, they definitely didn't just get their needs, they attacked them, and that's what makes it a really good draft. Let's move on to the worst drafts. Let's get negative here. Let's become negative Nancy's. Let's get Karens into this to really talk bad about these teams. So the worst draft to me was the Green Bay Packers. We talked about it. We don't need to keep rubbing salt in the wound. We're not making beef jerky here. All right, the worst draft. Number 1, Atlanta Falcons. I had no idea what they were doing reaching for A.J. Terrell. A.J. Terrell is a really solid corner, but he's very inconsistent. At his peak, he's a solid, above-average NFL starter. At his floor, the dude is burnt toast. Against some of the best talent, when you watched him against Ruggs, when you watched him against some of these Alabama guys, he was always following. And if it wasn't for that unbelievable defensive line of Clemson, it would have been a long day for A.J. Terrell. Matt Hennessy, good, not great. I think when you have the center and Alex Mack, getting a backup's awesome, but I think they reached on this one, and they didn't have any options. They only had like 4 or 5 picks. The next worst draft to me, the Las Vegas Raiders. And now this is a draft that's been a hot button topic of debate on Twitter. The Raiders wanted to add weapons, all right, and they went full Al Davis mode in their first pick with Henry Ruggs III. Ruggs, extremely talented. My knock on him, he's never been a true number 1 wide receiver. That's what they needed. Now they have 2 guys on their roster who have never been true number 1 wide receivers in Tyrell Williams and Henry Ruggs. When you look at the Raiders, I think they reached a little bit on Damon Arnett, but I really like Damon Arnett. I think he's one of the best corners in the draft. Lynn Bowden, also a reach. Brian Edwards, didn't really know much about him. Then linebacker safety Tanner Muse, good athlete, doesn't really have a position. He's not Isaiah Simmons. He doesn't have that same value, but I think he'd be a solid pro. John Simpson. Mystery, Mick Robertson. I think with the Raiders, there was just so much mystery in their picks. The only one that's not a mystery is Ruggs, but does he provide the Raiders with what they need? And that's a true number 1 target. He's a little bit slender in his frame. He's not the strongest receiver. He is a jitterbug, though, and he is fast. I think Arnett's going to be one of the best corners in this draft. I'll put him up against anybody, but the rest of the draft, it's just riddled with mystery. What is Lynn Bowden? Is he going to be a running back? Is he going to be a receiver? Are you going to maximize his versatility? Are you going to put him at kick return and punt return? Tanner Muse, what is he going to put on weight and move to linebacker? Is he going to play safety? Is he going to try to hang in that middle weight and play the hybrid? We'll see. And that's where the Raiders draft is one of the worst to me. There was just so much mystery behind their picks, what they're going to be. That, to me, is too much of a question. The next worst draft to me, Philadelphia. Philadelphia. They drafted Jalen Hurts, all right, and this was the reasoning behind it. What happens if your starting quarterback gets the coronavirus? That was ridiculous. Jalen Reagor's one of my favorite receivers in the draft, but he was more upside than actual production. And this just was not a very exciting draft for the Eagles, And I don't hate the Eagles. They're one of my favorites. Jalen Reagor, Jalen Hurts, Davion Taylor, Kevon Wallace, Jack Driscoll, John Hightower, Sean Bradley, Quez Watkins, Prince Tega, Wanago. They're solid players, but they didn't fix one of their big offensive weaknesses, and that's why it's just not one of the best drafts. I think the Hurts pick and the Reagor picks where they were kind of ruined the draft a little bit for the Eagles. Some other drafts I didn't like. Let's scroll through the list I got. The Texans, they just had a small draft. The Bears, they didn't have a first-round pick, so that kind of hurts them, but they got a solid tight end in Cole Kmet. Besides that, it wasn't a very special draft, and then I think the Chargers were hurt mostly because they had a small draft. I liked the Justin Herbert pick. I really liked the Kenneth Murray pick. Wasn't so sure about the Joshua Kelly pick, but you do need a second running back behind Eckler because of his durability questions. And then I really like the KJ Hill pick, but small draft. So yeah, that's it. I think the rest of the teams did solid, above average. It was all right. So the final question surrounding the NFL draft this year: was the NFL draft a success? To me, it was 100% a success. And to me, it was better than most of the last few drafts. The ratings showed it. And I don't want to knock Nashville, but it kind of took away from the moments of the players. And it was more about, oh my God, the draft's in Nashville, than, oh my God, these players are living out their entire dreams. And I think the NFL draft sort of went back to the roots with that. As I spoke in the beginning of the show, my favorite aspect was seeing the lives of the personnel, the coaches, and players. It made the experience personal, which made the draft even more successful than any draft ever before. The worst part of this draft, where it totally failed, was the Luke Bryan moment. And for any of you guys who were watching that, it was super corny. It would seem extremely unnecessary, and it randomly happened in like the fourth round. But you get I guess you're gonna mix the audience up. He sang an old song too. But yeah, the Luke Bryan part was weird. I think the draft-a-thon needs to continue. I think regardless of if it's for pandemic support or for anything, I think that money they raised, that $100 millions of dollars they raised, can do good in a lot of ways. So I'm really pro that. And the only other loss to me was the fact that every player that was drafted had to have their darkest story televised in that shining moment. Whether it was a grandparent dying, a sibling dying, a dad going to jail, a mom being addicted to drugs. It was terrible. I mean, I get it. Those stories drive ratings. Those stories drive moral support for this player long term. But over and over and over again, and it just, you're taking away from the actual moment that needs to be celebrated. And yes, I know you want to show the triumphs and tribulations of these athletes and what it took them to get there. But this is not the time. Save that for outside the lines, and save that for your think pieces after the draft is over. You could really get some good columns out of that. It's not an infographic for the draft. It is not Trey Wingo's go-to line. That is what bothered me the most about the draft. But all in all, I think it was successful. You had business casual Goodell, a personal experience. It was the only live sporting event in the past month. It was sensational. It got the highest ratings ever for an NFL draft, and that is what it's all about. To close out the day, I'm going to do the wide world of sports. We're going to talk about some news. First thing on the docket, the Ball brothers sign with Roc Nation Sport. That is Jay-Z's agent label, whatever it's called, agency. That's the word I was looking for. The best tweet I saw about this was buy two, get one free. That is how people feel about Lonzo, LaMelo, with LiAngelo Ball being the third one free. I think this is a good move for them. I think the representation failed. Lonzo, I think LaMelo did a great thing getting across the pond all the way across the Pacific Ocean, getting to Australia and sort of making his own path. And I think signing with Rock Nation is a good move for them. I think they're going to have trusted advisors this time. No one's going to be stealing millions of dollars from Lonzo anymore or the Big Baller brand. And that's extremely important. I think when you look at what happened with the Ball brothers, especially with Lonzo, it was very unfortunate. And I think that's what Rock Nation's going to provide, is that stability they need. All right, Jameis Winston signed with the Saints today. They are really good at getting backup quarterbacks. So recently they re-signed Taysom Hill by giving him a 2-year, $21 million extension, making him one of the highest backup quarterbacks in the league. Hill is also getting paid for his versatility, his ability as a receiver, his ability as a running back, his ability as a tight end, his ability on special teams. But per last year, you saw what happened when Teddy Bridgewater played. He was just a better quarterback than Taysom Hill. Jameis Winston is going to sign a small deal, but he is going to go and learn from the best. I think Jameis is a very talented football player. I think when he is on, he is one of the best in the league. But when he is off, it is volatile and not in the right way. 33 touchdowns, 30 interceptions. It was a year that was up and down, to say the least. But really, I think it's going to be a good move long-term for his career. I think this is good for image repair. And I think when it's all said and done, there's going to be some job openings for a guy like Jameis Winston in the future. Think Denver, think Carolina, think places who have new starting quarterbacks, the Bears, that might want to take a chance on Jameis in the near future. The next piece of news I want to report on as a reporter is the NBA pushes back their return to facility dates to May 8th. This, once again, is another pushback. The first date they were expecting to get back to facilities was April 15th. Now it's pushed back to May 8th after it was set to be May 1st. And this is just another thing in a long line of things. The Golden State Warriors said they were not going to go back to practice when the date was set. And that's all good for them. They were terrible this year anyway, so it didn't matter. But it just shows that this thing is dragging out and that you need to follow safety precautions. All right, so 2021 mock draft season is here. Trey Lance is not Justin Fields. I already saw that. The North Dakota State quarterback was responsible for 41 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He led the North Dakota State Bisons to another national title. What's that in how many decades, But to me, he reminded me a lot more of Easton Stick, who's on the Los Angeles Chargers, and a lot less of Carson Wentz. I think he's going to be a really solid quarterback, but is he better than Justin Fields? Not in my eyes. The first round also will not just be 3 teams like they always predict. This year it's LSU, Alabama, Ohio State, once again, making up the majority of the picks. That doesn't happen every year. There's going to be a lot of teams getting action in the first round, but really it's not going to just be 3 or 4 teams. It's not going to be Ohio State, LSU, Alabama, Georgia, Penn State. It's not just going to be 5 teams, all right? So stop wasting time and predicting 3 teams. If you're actually going to do a way too early mock draft, let's not just pick popular players from popular teams. Let's have your scouting reports a little more prepared so we can take these drafts seriously. Because I remember last year, everyone was telling me Jake Fromm was the 4th quarterback, or the first quarterback taken off the board at the 4th spot. Another thing that was really funny was people getting mad about the draft order, but every single person is setting their draft order based on Las Vegas odds, so don't get mad at them for that. It's Vegas. All right, and obviously the most important thing is they're never accurate. Mock draft 2021 way too early. Don't fall for them. Don't click the bait. That is legitimately a clickbait article just to get you incited with rage. And that is the show today. All right, we went heavy into the draft discussion. I gave you my best and worst draft picks. I also gave you business casual Roger Goodell and what made this draft a success. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for enjoying this time with me as I talk the NFL draft. And as we move forward in the future, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and rate it wherever you listen to the podcast, Apple, Spotify, Google Play, wherever. It helps get more traffic, and it helps me understand what you guys want from me. Thanks for listening. This is your host, signing out. Peace.